Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with yours truly. You requested we go deep on Bayesian A/B testing and how it's being used in insurance, warranties, and risk management. So we've got some great sources lined up here, ready to get into it.
Absolutely. Should be a fascinating one.
I think so too. Now, these fields might not be the first things you think of when you hear about A/B testing.
That's true. It's a bit different from how it's usually used, like with websites, for example.
Right. So how come the typical A/B testing method doesn't really fit these industries?
Well, the thing is, traditional A/B testing mainly looks at averages, which, works fine in lots of cases. But in insurance or risk management, what really matters are the extremes, the rare events.
I see. So it's about those things that don't happen very often but can have huge consequences if they do.
Exactly. Think about something like a natural disaster or a massive product recall. Those are the things that can really make or break a company.
That makes sense. So it's less about figuring out the average cost of a car repair and more about knowing what the absolute worst case scenario might cost, right?
Yeah, you got it. A traditional test might tell you that a car part has a 1% chance of failing. But the real question is, what happens in that 1%? That's what Bayesian A/B testing tries to figure out.
Okay, so Bayesian testing is all about getting a more complete picture, not just the average, but the whole range of possibilities. So how does it actually work? What makes it Bayesian anyway?
The key is how it uses probability. It doesn't just give you a yes or no answer. It gives you a range of possible outcomes. We call that a posterior distribution. It shows you how likely all the different outcomes are, including those extreme cases.
So instead of saying this new policy will make customers happier, it would be more like there's a 70% chance this change will boost satisfaction by 10%, but there's also a 30% chance it'll have no effect or even make things worse.
Precisely. You get a much more nuanced and realistic view because it factors in what you already know and the data you're getting from the tests, which is really important when the stakes are high and one bad decision could be a disaster.
And from what I've seen in these sources, it seems like there are a ton of ways to use this. So where is Bayesian A/B testing already having a big impact?
One area is insurance policy design. Companies can test out different features and see what customers actually prefer. Like, do people want a lower monthly payment, even if it means paying more if something happens, or the other way around?
That's interesting. So they can experiment with different options and see how people respond instead of just guessing or relying on old school market research.
Exactly. And that's just one example. Bayesian A/B testing can also be used to make marketing campaigns way more effective, like figuring out what messages work best to attract new customers.
So you can A/B test different subject lines for emails, see which ones make people actually open those policy renewal reminders.
Huh. Yeah, good example. By using this kind of analysis, companies can fine-tune their campaigns, even down to the wording of a single sentence. It's all about those small changes that can make a big difference in how customers react.
That all sounds great for getting new customers. But what about keeping the ones they already have?
Oh, it's definitely useful for that too. Reducing what we call churn. By testing different ways of communicating or how customer service is handled, they can figure out what makes people happy and keeps them coming back.
Sounds like almost every part of dealing with a customer could be improved with this.
And it's not just customer-facing stuff either. Take claims processing, for example. Nobody likes dealing with a slow or confusing claims process.
I hear that. How does Bayesian A/B testing help with that?
It lets companies experiment with different methods and figure out what really works best, comparing the traditional ways of doing things with new digital options, testing different ways of communicating, even just changing how the online forms are designed.
So using data to make the whole process easier for the customer.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot between being efficient for the company and making sure the customer has a good experience.
We've talked a lot about how it's good for customers, but I'm guessing this is also really important for managing risk, right? Which is obviously huge in these fields.
Absolutely. It's a powerful tool for risk assessment and underwriting, too. You can refine your risk models by testing different factors and criteria, even using data from social media or health trackers to get more accurate assessment.
Wow, that's some next level stuff. But are there any, I don't know, downsides or challenges to using Bayesian A/B testing?
Of course, no tool is perfect. One thing is you need to make sure you have enough data to draw any real conclusions. Like any statistical analysis, you can't base big decisions on a tiny sample.
Makes sense. What else should people be aware of?
Another big one is making sure your tests are ethical, especially when you're dealing with sensitive customer data. You have to think about privacy and fairness and make sure everything you do follows the rules.
Really important point. It's not just about getting results, it's about getting them the right way. Anything else to keep in mind?
One mistake people sometimes make is misinterpreting the results. Just because two things happen together doesn't mean one caused the other. It's easy to see patterns where there are none. So you have to be careful about how you interpret the data.
So it's not some magic solution, but a tool that needs to be used carefully. What about the technical side of it? Do you need a PhD in statistics to make this work?
Not necessarily. There are a lot of user-friendly tools and platforms out there these days that make it easier for anyone to use, but it's still important to have some expertise to make sure the tests are set up right and the data is analyzed correctly.
So a balance of having powerful tools and knowing how to use them responsibly. Any other words of caution?
Well, another challenge is that it can be tempting to test too many things at once. It's usually best to focus on one thing at a time so you can see the impact clearly.
So being strategic and methodical, not just trying everything and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, you have to think about the long-term effects of the changes you make. Something that seems like a good idea in the short term might have unintended consequences down the road.
Always looking at the bigger picture, not just chasing quick wins. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. From the basics of Bayesian A/B testing to all the ways it can be used and even the potential downsides. Now, I'm ready to see how this all works in the real world. Want to dive into some real-life examples.
Let's do it. Let's see how this all plays out in practice.
Great. But first, let's take a quick break so we can all absorb this information. We'll be back in a flash with more on Bayesian A/B testing, so stay tuned.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So I'm really interested to see how Bayesian A/B testing is being used in real-world situations. What kind of examples really showcase its strengths?
Well, one interesting area is in calculating something called tail value at risk, or TVR for short.
Wow.
It's a metric that's used a lot in finance and insurance. It helps to understand potential losses from those extreme events we were talking about earlier. Okay, TVAR. So for those of us who aren't finance experts, can you break that down a bit? What does tail value at risk actually mean?
Sure. Imagine you're looking at potential losses, let's say from a natural disaster. The regular value at risk, or VIR, might tell you there's a 95% chance your losses won't go over a certain amount, let's say $10 million.
Okay, so far so good.
TVAR takes that a step further. It asks, okay, but what if that 5% chance actually happens? What's the average loss beyond that $10 million mark?
I see. So it's not just about avoiding the most likely losses, but also being prepared for how bad things could get in those, worst case scenarios.
Exactly. It focuses on that tail end of the probability distribution, the high impact events that traditional methods might not fully capture. And Bayesian A/B testing helps us model these events more accurately.
So you can make better decisions about things like, insurance premiums or investment strategies.
Right. Instead of just hoping for the best, you're using the data to prepare for those unlikely but potentially devastating scenarios.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there other examples where this kind of thinking is really valuable?
Let's look at something seemingly simple, like the classic Bernoulli trial. It's basically a simple experiment with two possible outcomes.
Like flipping a coin, heads or tails?
Yeah, exactly. Now, how does that apply to something as complex as insurance, you might ask?
I was just thinking that.
Well, let's say an insurance company is testing two different methods for processing claims. Method A might have a slightly higher success rate overall, but when you analyze the data using Bayesian methods, you discover that method B, while maybe slightly less successful on average, actually leads to fewer catastrophic failures. You know, those cases where a claim is mishandled and it has really bad consequences.
So even though method A is better on average, method B is more consistent and avoids those really costly mistakes.
Precisely. And in a field like insurance, where even one major error can have a huge impact, consistency and minimizing those extreme downsides are often more valuable than just having a slightly better average performance.
Those examples really highlight how Bayesian A/B testing goes beyond just looking at averages. It seems particularly well suited for situations where those rare events have, outsized consequences.
You got it. It's a powerful tool for understanding the full range of possibilities, not just the most likely outcome.
Okay, one term I keep hearing is posterior distribution. Can you explain that in a way that even someone like me who hasn't taken a statistics class in years can understand?
Let me try. Think of it this way. You have an initial belief about something, right? Let's say the likelihood that a certain type of customer will file a claim. That's your prior belief, based on your experience and whatever data you have.
Okay, so I have a starting point.
Then you run an A/B test, and you gather new information. The posterior distribution takes your prior belief and combines it with this new evidence to give you an updated, more informed perspective.
So it's like taking your initial hunch and refining it based on real-world data.
Exactly. The posterior distribution shows you the most likely scenarios, taking everything you know into account. And in Bayesian A/B testing, this is what guides your decision-making.
Now that we have a better grasp of the concept, are there any specific case studies that demonstrate how this works in the real world?
Absolutely. Let's talk about warranty services. Let's say a company is using Bayesian A/B testing to try out different warranty terms and conditions. Things like how long the coverage lasts or what types of repairs are included.
That makes sense. They can test out different offers without taking on too much risk, see what customers like best.
Right. So they might test offering a longer warranty period but at a higher price, or compare a really comprehensive plan to a more basic one. Bayesian A/B testing can help them find that sweet spot between what customers want and what makes financial sense for the company.
It seems like it takes a lot of the guesswork out of those decisions. Are there any examples of companies actually doing this successfully with warranties?
There's this one consumer electronics company. They used Bayesian A/B testing to analyze data from their customer support calls, and they found that a particular component was more likely to fail after a certain amount of use. This insight allowed them to adjust their warranty terms to cover that specific failure for a longer time.
So they were able to spot a hidden risk and address it before it became a bigger problem. Smart.
Yeah, exactly. And it likely made their customers happier, too, because it showed that the company was standing behind their product.
Win-win. These examples are really interesting. I'm starting to see how Bayesian A/B testing can have a real impact. It's not just a theory, it's a practical tool.
And we're really just scratching the surface here. I think as this approach becomes more common, we're going to see even more innovative applications.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've gone from the basics of Bayesian A/B testing to its real-world applications. I'm excited to hear your final thoughts on all of this and what you see for the future of this field. Ready to wrap things up?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive. It's really been fascinating learning about Bayesian A/B testing. It's a whole different way of thinking about data and making decisions.
It definitely is a shift in perspective. Once you start seeing things through that Bayesian lens, it's hard to go back.
So as we wrap things up, what are the key takeaways you want our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that Bayesian A/B testing isn't just like some fancy statistical technique. It's more of a mindset shift, you know? It's about accepting that there's always uncertainty and using data to navigate those tricky areas where the traditional methods don't quite cut it.
And it seems particularly well suited for industries like insurance, warranties, and risk management, where those uncertainties could mean really big financial consequences.
Exactly. And as we've discussed, it's got applications all over the place, from designing policies to processing claims, even creating risk models for those rare but really high-impact events.
Instead of just focusing on averages, it lets you look at all the possibilities, right? And make decisions that minimize those potentially disastrous downsides.
Yeah, you got it. It's about understanding the whole picture, not just the most likely scenario.
And we've also seen how it can lead to a better experience for customers, making processes smoother, personalizing offers, and just generally building trust.
It's a win-win, really. Companies can make smarter decisions, manage risk more effectively, and create products and services that people actually want.
And all of this is driven by data, not just gut feelings or guesswork.
Right. It's about letting the evidence lead you to the best possible outcome.
Of course, there are some challenges to keep in mind, like making sure you have enough data, thinking about privacy, and interpreting the results correctly.
Those are important considerations. It's a powerful tool, but you need to use it responsibly.
But overall, the potential benefits seem pretty significant.
Absolutely. And the exciting thing is, we're really just at the beginning of this. I think we'll see even more innovative uses for Bayesian A/B testing as more companies start using it.
So it's a rapidly evolving field with a lot of potential.
Exactly. Who knows? We might start seeing it used in all sorts of new areas, like healthcare, education, even government policy.
Wow. Now that's an interesting thought. Using data to make better decisions about public health, personalized learning plans for students, even improve how government services are delivered.
It's not just about the numbers themselves. It's about using data to make things better for people.
That's a great point. It's not just about making businesses more profitable. It's about using data to have a positive impact on the world.
I like how you put that. It's definitely an exciting time to be working in this field.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. I hope our listener is feeling inspired to learn more about this and maybe even think about how these ideas could apply to their own work.
I think they will. It's a journey of continuous learning, right? The more we test, the more we learn, and the better our decisions become. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and never stop thinking like a Bayesian.
Well said. Maybe the next big breakthrough in Bayesian A/B testing will come from one of our listeners.
That would be amazing. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new along the way.
It's been great exploring this topic with you.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep diving deep.